car market normalized in 2024, which means that now that we're in 2025, we will finally begin to see depreciation trends that mimic the normal car market. Depreciation trends that are much more predictable and standard rather than the depreciation that we've been seeing over the last couple of years, which is depreciation off of record high values. And while this does mean that the days of seeing cars drop by 10 or 20% on a month-by-month basis, those days are definitely over unless something else happens to the car market in the coming years. But what this does mean is that for car buyers looking to purchase the car this year, it'll be much easier to predict and plan for the depreciation that their vehicles may experience, which is ultimately great news. And so with this in mind, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the cars that you should absolutely avoid purchasing in 2025 because of their horrendous depreciation. And I'm not only going to be breaking down why you should avoid these cars, how much they depreciate, but I'm also going to be talking about some alternatives that you can look at instead. But first, I do want to take a quick moment to acknowledge what happened on New Year's Day, as I've gotten a lot of emails and DMs of people asking me my thoughts. As people most likely already are aware of, on New Year's there was a terrorist attack in New Orleans that was carried out with a Turo vehicle. There was also a bombing in Las Vegas with a Turo-rented Cybertruck. Now, I don't plan on, nor do I want to make a standalone video breaking down my thoughts on these instances, because it feels wrong to make content speculating about what ultimately has led to dozens of lives being lost. But it also feels wrong to just completely ignore what has been going on and to not mention it, because at the end of the day, I am a Turo content creator first and foremost. There are a lot of people who have discovered Turo because of my channel and because of my videos, and Turo has been in the past and is currently a huge focus on this channel. And so I wanted to take a moment just to say that my thoughts are, of course, with the people who have been impacted by this tragedy, and I truly feel for every single person who's involved. I have made videos in the past, and I probably will make another one in the future whenever the dust has settled, breaking down how Turo insurance works in a worst case scenario. What happens if your car is wrecked, if your car is stolen, how this operates from a Turo terms of service perspective. And while the discussion of how Turo hosts can protect themselves in an instance like this occurring, I think it is a topic that is important to discuss, but I think given the circumstances, it's not one that is appropriate to discuss at this time. But though I do have videos where I have talked about insurance and Turo liability in the past if you want to check those out. Absolutely terrible situation. My heart goes out to everyone who's involved. Of course, the people who lost their life, their family, the people injured, and of course the Turo hosts that are involved as well. The first car on my list with some of the worst depreciation this year is electric vehicles. And while all electric vehicles depreciate poorly, there are some that depreciate much worse than others. The Kona Electric has a 1-year depreciation of 20.55%, far worse than the industry average. The Model 3 is even worse at 23%. The Mustang Mach-E depreciates 19.36%, and the Audi e-tron, which has depreciated anywhere between 20 and 25% depending on the trim model. Again, keep in mind that all of the figures that I just stated are 1-year depreciation for these vehicles. Typically, whenever mainstream media looks at depreciation for cars, they either look at depreciation of 3-year or 5-year increments, and so the fact that in some cases we're seeing a quarter of a car's value being lost in the first year, it is absolutely insane. The problem with electric vehicles is that the vast majority of EVs depreciate very, very poorly, and even the ones that don't depreciate the worst, they are far from good when it comes to the average of the overall car market. And so my recommendation for 2025 would be, if you are someone who is wanting to own an electric vehicle, I would recommend looking at buying used. Or, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but you could also look at leasing. I'm not a proponent of leasing, but if you are someone who's hellbent on not buying used, then leasing an EV, in my humble opinion, is much less risky than buying new. Because there are many automakers that are offering solid lease deals on their electric vehicles, and you can also claim the EV tax credit on a lease. And of course, with a lease, you don't have to worry about what you're going to do and how you're going to sell a car in a couple of years whenever it's lost a ton of its value. Don't get me wrong, I do not like leases, and I think that leases are a lot less advantageous than what people like to believe. But I think in the case of electric vehicles, given the insane amount of depreciation, the EV tax credit, I think in some scenarios this could make sense. Though I still think that buying used is better than leasing, but I also think that leasing is better than buying new. Another car to avoid is one that is actually ranked one of the worst depreciating cars of the year, and that is the Lincoln Navigator. Lincoln Navigators, but truthfully any luxury SUV, depreciates very, very poorly. And for a car that has a starting MSRP of $83,000 and can go well above that and cost over $110,000 for the higher trim trims like their Black Label. With the Lincoln Navigator, you could potentially lose over $50,000 in depreciation over the course of 3 years. Now, truthfully, like I mentioned a moment ago, luxury SUVs pretty much across the board have bad depreciation. So if depreciation is top of mind for you, I probably would recommend staying away from luxury SUVs altogether. But if the name of your game is to simply limit depreciation and you're not trying to avoid it altogether, then a car that you could possibly consider is the Cadillac Escalade. And while the Cadillac Escalade and the Lincoln Navigator are very, very similar in many regards, the Cadillac Escalade actually has much better depreciation. Now, again, don't get me wrong, from a depreciation standpoint, there are cars out there that are much better than the Escalade, but when comparing the Escalade to the Navigator, the Escalade has a much more favorable depreciation figure. While the Lincoln loses over half of its value in the first 3 years, the Escalade loses that same amount of value in 5. So you get the same amount of depreciation spread over an extra 2 years. And while in the first year of ownership with the Lincoln, you lose 23% of its value, with the Escalade, you only lose 15%. Much better from a depreciation standpoint, and truthfully, these cars are pretty similar from a reliability perspective, so if depreciation is something that you're concerned about, then I would go with the Cadillac. Next is the less affluent cousin of the Navigator, which is the Ford Expedition. The Ford Expedition is a bit of a weird vehicle because while most would not classify this car as a luxury SUV, the Platinum Max, which is the highest longer trim version of the Expedition, starts at $83,800, and these cars are certainly not economical. And while again, this isn't technically a luxury SUV, it's pretty damn close. The Expedition offers a variety of trims depending on your need, with the base model being more basic and smaller, with their fully loaded model being extremely nice and extremely large. The Ford Expedition can almost be classified as two different vehicles depending on the trim, the exact model, and your specific needs, because between the base model and the fully loaded model, these cars are quite a bit different. But no matter how you slice it, this car depreciates poorly. And while I can hear the moans and groans now from the other side of the camera, if depreciation is something that you are worried about and you are considering the Expedition, then I would probably pivot your sights to something like a Toyota. The Toyota 4Runner, while not the exact alternative to the Expedition, can fit the same amount of people with the depreciation rate a fraction of that of the Expedition. In fact, the 4Runner has a better depreciation rate than most cars sitting on the road today and is currently sitting in the top 10 cars with the best depreciation, with only losing 39% of its value in 5 years and a first-year depreciation of only about 10%. If you're looking for something a bit larger, then maybe something like the Sequoia, a car that has an extremely comparable, if not better, depreciation than the 4Runner at 35 to 40% over 5 years. And similar to the Expedition Max compared to the Expedition base model, the Sequoia is a bit bigger than the Toyota 4Runner, having 3 rows, larger trunk space, and more cargo. Last but not least is Jaguar. Do not buy a Jaguar. And there are many reasons why I say this. First is the fact that Jaguar has stopped producing new cars in 2025, making any new car you buy today an older new car. Because while there are not any new 2025 models that you can buy from Jaguar, there are new 2024 and even 2023 models that you can buy from the brand, and while buying a 2024 model new car in 2025 may lead to fat discounts, it doesn't mean it's a good choice. Jaguar is also transitioning to a 100% EV lineup, a decision that will no doubt have a trickle-down effect on the values of their older gas lineup. Not to mention the fact that Jaguars are expensive and their gas model vehicles have poor reliability and a history of poor depreciation. And so if you're looking for a luxury vehicle and you're considering something like a Jaguar, I encourage you to look at anything else. BMW, Audi, Mercedes, anything. But there you guys have it, some of the cars that you should absolutely avoid in 2025 based off of depreciation trends. Whether you buy these cars or not, I don't really care, but the one thing that you should be prepared for is that all of the cars that I listed in today's video will depreciate very, very poorly, and you should at least be prepared for that. Like always, if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.